Marble steps are cool at dawn. Olive leaves still hold the night. Smoke is curling slow and thin. Names I whisper to the light. Sing, oh, sing to the stones and sky. Let the old words rise. Let the old words rise. Feet on earth and eyes held high.
Hvad så, folkens? Welcome back to another video. We are heading into how Drusus formed Roman's Germanic frontier. Damn, these titles just keep getting longer. Yeah, we heard that in the last video that we're heading into the Germanic frontier and Teutoburg Forest. I heard the name Teutoburg Forest before. I don't really know what happened. So yeah, pretty interesting. We saw a bunch of different wars done, a bit of a humiliation for Rome in Yemen. That was pretty funny. How like they acted like they only lost like a couple of guys in a war against 10,000. Probably one of the most stupid wars, stupid lies I heard from a Roman video for now. And it seems like the Roman commanders didn't really believe it either. So yeah, pretty bad. So let's get into it.
In 16 BCE, a young man named Nero Claudius Drusus stood before the Senate to legislate as praetor on behalf of his elder brother Tiberius, who had
I heard the name Nero before.
Left Rome with their stepfather Augustus to deal with a military disaster on the Rhine, the mighty river which served as the main frontier between the empire and the wild Germanic tribes beyond. Soon the Rhine would become the home of this young man, as Drusus's rapid and repeated military successes brought him to the height of Roman popularity and Augustus's favor. Welcome to our second episode on the Julio-Claudian emperors of Rome, where we will explore the ephemeral career of Nero Claudius Drusus and the beginning of the Germanic Wars. Likely born on the 13th of January 38 BCE, Nero Claudius Drusus was the younger son of Livia Drusilla and Tiberius Claudius Nero, and stepson to Octavian, the heir to Julius Caesar. During his youth, a scandal arose that he was actually the son of Octavian, but Livia had already been pregnant when she was introduced to the heir of Caesar, so Drusus could not have been his sire. Drusus was born into a turbulent period. While he experienced a much higher quality of life than most children in the ancient world, the reality he faced was to grow up thrust into the violence and political labyrinth of civil war. It was his new stepfather Octavian who ultimately spared him of this fate. Sadly, little is known of Drusus's early life. He was almost certainly educated in Rome, learning Greek and Latin, and was prepared for a political and military career under the auspices of his stepfather. He would enter public life at a young age, a mere 19, as his stepfather, the now Emperor Augustus, had granted all his adopted and biological sons the right to hold offices 5 years before the minimum age at which other Romans were eligible back in 19 BCE.
Damn, okay, we had got a bit of nepotism here. It gotta be pretty crazy to like grow up in like that Civil War era. Damn, that gotta be tough. Oof.
In 17 BCE, a crisis emerged beyond Rome's northern border, born from migratory, climatic, and economic revolutions occurring north of the Rhine and Danube. Like the Celtic peoples, who the Romans had only recently subdued, the early Germanic peoples were sophisticated farmers and had recently developed advanced agricultural techniques that resulted in higher crop yields and higher population density. This resulted in more economic activity, as well as pressure for land and resources from an increasing population. These factors often drove some groups of people to migrate, particularly those who had the wealth and power to support movement or expansion. Before the Roman colonization of the Rhine and Danube borders, this kind of migratory exchange was more fluid, resulting in the organic cross-pollination of the many decentralized tribes who lived in the region. However, there was now only a single political agent with whom they could negotiate, whose authorities were positioned much further from the frontier. Unable to quickly communicate with their leadership, which was located hundreds of miles away in, well, Rome, raiding was more often resorted to as a solution, and was met with punitive force by the new imperial power. The year 25 BCE had already seen one little-known expedition launched by Marcus Vinicius in response to the execution of Roman merchants and other tradesmen along the Rhine. Unfortunately, the details are lost, but it was so successful that his men proclaimed Augustus imperator. Trouble emerged again in 19 BCE, which warranted a response directly from Marcus Agrippa.
I always wondered why Rome never really conquered the Germanic tribes. Like, what is so different from the Germanic tribes compared to like the Gallic tribes? Like, I don't know. Like, gotta have been something. It can't just be because there's not gonna be another Caesar. Gotta be something.
Augustus's right hand. With a renewed revolt requiring his attention in Spain, Agrippa's solution was quick but more permanent. The Ubii, a Latin Germanic people, had been under pressure from the Suebi, a large confederation that Tacitus and Pliny would classify as belonging to the Immermones tribe, along with the Marcomanni and the Quadi. While Cassius Dio states that there was initially some fighting involved between both the Gallic nations and the Germanic peoples, Agrippa brokered a peaceful compromise between them, of the Rhine, in exchange for military service to Rome, a solution which was becoming the norm empire-wide. The Ubii were given a settlement known as Oppidum Ubiorum, the foundation of the modern German city of Cologne. Agrippa also reorganized and settled the Treveri, giving them similar terms and laying the foundations for what would become Augusta Treverorum. Likewise, a cohors ubiorum peditum.
So they're building like Germanic frontiers to like protect themselves from raids. Interesting. It's a pretty smart strategy, honestly, especially if you have no interest in really conquering the entire area.
Equitum and an alla Treverorum were established, beginning the establishment of the permanent Roman military presence on the Limes Germanicus. While entering into foedus military service with the Romans was an effective long-term solution, it could also be a double-edged sword. Roman favoritism towards one Germanic tribe could spark retaliatory attacks from other Germanic tribes, which may have been a partial reason for the renewed raiding of 17 BCE. Three peoples, the Sicambri, Usipetes, and Tencteri, crossed the Rhine in...
Never thought about favoritism in that way. Like, can they really complain if they're not an ally of Rome?
17 BCE and raided the region, looking for new territory to settle. Since Agrippa's departure, Gallia Belgica had been under the stewardship of the talented Marcus Lollius, and the area had been reinforced with units from Spain after the genocide of the Iberian Cantabri tribe had been completed the year before. However, this would prove to be Lollius's last governorship. The Confederation of the Sicambri, under their king Melo, had already defeated an ala of local auxiliary cavalry when they stumbled into the advance of Legio V Alaudae in the pursuit. Lollius found himself in a disastrous ambush that resulted in the capture of the standard of the 5th Alaudae, a huge humiliation just after Augustus had retrieved the standards lost at Carrhae 3 years before. As Lollius had been hand-picked, this was an inexcusable failure, and Augustus and Tiberius relieved him and took control of the situation at the beginning of 16 BCE. When Augustus arrived at Monatia, he learned the situation had already been resolved, for the Sicambri had learned of his advance and had retreated back across the Rhine for the winter, recognized the region, expanding Belgica, and installed his stepson Tiberius as governor, while he turned his attention to problems across the rest of the empire. Tiberius quickly shifted the military focus to the nearby Alps, as the Comuni and Venii had been raiding through the passes into Liguria, only to be stopped by Publius Silius Nerva. The Reti, just beyond the passes, were also slaughtering military-aged Roman male colonists in the region, even allegedly killing any pregnant woman whom their augurs had so divined to be carrying a son. In
Jeez.
15 BCE, having already entered the political arena during Tiberius's absence the year before, Augustus chose his younger stepson Drusus to lead the campaign across the Alps.
Let's go, Drusus.
Drusus's campaign is recorded in some detail by Cassius Dio. He began in northeastern Italy, leaving the Veneto region for the Dolomites and reaching the Tridentine Mountains, where he met the Reti in his first battle. The lightly armed Reti were easily overcome and retreated up the Reschan Pass. Drusus pursued them, establishing a bridge over the Adige at Bolzano and moving onto the steep northern slope of the pass. At this point, the Reti had run out of reserve armaments, and Drusus again defeated them when he emerged on the north side of the Alps. Impressed with his success, Augustus awarded Drusus with the post of praetor, but his campaign was yet unfinished. While Drusus had advanced through the eastern Alps, Tiberius had marched out of Monatia in the west, with orders to permanently quell the peoples of the northern slopes, taking both the Furka and Walensee passes through the Alps and into Raetia. According to Cassius Dio, none of the peoples of the Reti could muster the forces to meet Tiberius and Drusus simultaneously, and quickly collapsed. United in the field, Tiberius and Drusus then turned east to the land of the Vindelici, besieging numerous strongholds. The fortress of the Gananes fell on August 1st, and the Vindelici soon followed. Neighbouring Noricum had been a Roman ally since 186 BCE and thought themselves safe. Unfortunately, they had offended the Romans the previous year and were instead taken by surprise. The Romans clambered up the mountainous slopes in a rapid siege of Virinum, breaching the gates and felling the kingdom in one blow. As with the Selassie a few years before, the military-age men were rounded up as prisoners, enslaved and deported. As with their neighbours, they were forced to pay a hefty tribute, and the lucky men were drafted into the new auxiliar units. Tiberius were bestowed with many honours for their success, including coins of Augustus raised upon a stella coralis, receiving olive branches from their likenesses. Horace praised their merits in a panegyric, and the army proclaimed Augustus imperator for a 10th time. Tiberius was sent east to deal with problems in Illyricum, and Drusus was promoted to the post of Legatus Augusti Pro Praetori for the Tres Galliae. However, this latter position came with strings attached. Drusus had proven his capacity to lead a campaign, and Augustus wanted the situation with Germania permanently resolved. Drusus quickly set about preparing for his forthcoming campaign. First, he conducted a census, which he used to establish the Concilium Gallarium, based in Monatia. He also took control of the production of silver denarii at the mint, to pay the army, provision supplies, and build new infrastructure in advance of the campaign. Moving additional legions from Spain to the Rhine, Drusus used these funds and manpower to build over 50 new fortlets on the Rhine, 2 bridges, 2 riverine fleets, and a new canal stretching from the Rhine to Lacus Flavo. Fortresses were built at Batavidorum, Vetera, Novatium, Oppidum Ubiorum, and Mogontiacum to house 7 legions. These legions were each positioned for an amphibious camp.
How big is the Rhine since you need like ships on it? Like, isn't this just a river?
Supported by waterborne logistics.
Never seen the Rhine.
Ships sent down from the recently established naval base of Fectium.
Never been to Germany either.
Finally, Drusus leveraged recent alliances with Germanic peoples, such as the Ubii and Batavi, to lay the groundwork necessary on the opposite bank of the Rhine. This preparation took 2 years, and the strain on Gaul caused a brief revolt in Aquitania, but in 12 BCE he was ready to launch the conquest of Germania.
Ooh. Wonder
The
how
war
long it's
opened
gonna
with a
get.
Transrhenian coalition of the Sicambri and several Gallic and Germanic nations who conspired to stoke a larger rebellion within Roman Belgica. Drusus adeptly contrived a plan to foil this alliance, inviting the Gallic leaders to the Council of the 60 Nations and suppressing the rebellion before it could begin. Drusus was quick to respond, repulsing the raiding Sicambri and then initiating a punitive expedition for the defeat of Lollius in 17 BCE, heading out from Batavidorum and devastating the lands of the Usipetes and Sicambri, forcing them to sit out the war and restore their fields and granaries. He then turned and sailed down the Rhine to Fectio, launching a naval expedition through the new canals of Drusus and into Lacus Flavo, and from there into the North Sea. Drusus was quick to make allies with the neighbouring Cananophetes and the Frisi, who provided reliable guides, men and supplies in exchange for military service and a modest tribute of cowhides. Armed with knowledge of the coasts,
Right,
Drusus
if you want more territory in like Germanic territory, why not make a new border here with this river?
his fleet sailed out of the Lacus Flavo and
Or
into
this
the
one.
Wadden Sea,
Or that
laying
one.
a brief siege to the
There's a lot
island
of rivers
Penis,
here.
and then entering the mouth of the Ems River. There he waged war against the Chauci, a people described as the noblest yet most impoverished of the Germans, before sailing further upstream against the Bructeri. Upriver, the Bructeri assaulted Drusus's flotilla with their own force of boats, combined with skirmishers, raining missiles from the banks. They were no match for the Roman river patrol vessels, armed with their own skirmishers and small bow-mounted catapultae. A small scouting force also continued along the coast, exploring as far as Jutland and possibly beyond. But
What?
the details of
Have they been to Jutland? Damn. Did not expect that at all. So the Romans were in Jutland.
the expedition are lost. Both of these forces reunited at the mouth of the Ems at the end of the campaign season,
Don't think they ever found like evidence of the Romans though.
but
I
ran
had never heard
aground on
about
mud
it.
flats when the Romans misjudged the tides. Luckily for Drusus, his new Frisian allies came through and helped rescue the Roman fleet, allowing them to return to Fectio before the onset of winter. Returning to Rome, Augustus promoted Drusus to Praetor Urbanus. The next year, 11 BCE, saw a second campaign into Germania. With the Frisi secured as allies on his flank and the Chauci quelled, Drusus set out from Vetera up the Lippe against the Usipetes. Suffering from the previous year's devastation, they quickly surrendered in the face of Drusus's onslaught. Bridging the river and crossing to the south, their allies, the Sicambri, were nowhere to be seen, as they were off raiding the neighbouring Chatti to the southeast for refusing to join their alliance against the Romans. In this lull, Drusus took advantage of his relative security to establish more permanent fortresses along the Lippe in preparation for deeper campaigns into
Why did Drusus not just conquer their territory? This is pretty funny, honestly. Like, they raided a neighbor for not joining against Rome, and then when they return home, Rome has just taken over all that land. Damn.
Germania.
Totally funny.
These fortresses, along with semi-permanent marching camps,
That is
which
like
can be
true
accurately
karma.
dated to the time of Drusus's campaign, reveal his rapid advance deeper into Germania up the Lippe and Wetter towards the Weser. During this march, a portent emerged. A swarm of bees landed upon the ropes and poles of the tent of the Prefectus Castrorum Hostilius Rufus, which was interpreted as an omen of an ambush. As the campaigning season closed, Drusus and his forces reached the Weser. With his supply lines overextended, he wisely chose to turn back to the new legionary fortress of Oberaden. It was during the retreat that the Cherusci and Sicambri emerged for battle, harassing him as he advanced towards a pass called Arbelo. The Battle of Arbelo survives in little detail, but those details that do survive are unique enough to provide a reasonable interpretation. The Cherusci, Sicambri, and other Germanic peoples had advanced ahead of Drusus's army towards this narrow defile, flanked on the sides by forests and higher ground, preparing it for battle. When the Romans entered, the Germanic peoples closed the pass on both sides and began harassing them with missiles. The Romans were driven together into a dense mass where they struggled to fight back, tripping over their marching packs and unable to throw their pila. Cassius Dio states that in this manner they would have destroyed the Romans. However, the Germanic warriors mistimed their finishing blow. Believing the Romans were ready to collapse, they charged in a disordered fashion, and the Romans were able to break their assault and send them into retreat. The sudden reversal cascaded through the rest of the Germanic army, turning the tide of the battle and bringing a stroke of incredible luck to Augustus's prodigy. Drusus quickly secured his position, establishing a new fortress at Aliso and moving the bulk of his forces to Oberaden to winter in Germania. Drusus returned once again to Rome with the acclamation of Imperator by his troops.
Jeez. Is it just me? I mean, okay. Drusus is decent. I feel like there's a bit of nepotism going on here because, like, he hasn't done that much. And then every year he just returns and then it's like a huge party and he's like the greatest conqueror ever. And it's like, kind of feel like the title of Imperator doesn't really mean that much anymore. Like, back in the day, I feel like there was only a few like imperators, right? Like Scipio Africanus, Sulla, Flaminius, Caesar, the big guys. This guy has been in a couple of battles and then he returns home to extreme glory. And these battles aren't even like that important. They aren't that impactful and they are not even that big. Like, I don't know. Feels a bit dirty.
Enamored by the success, Augustus granted Drusus the proconsular imperium, previously held by...
Completely forgot my boy Marius, sorry.
...by his recently departed companion Agrippa. He travelled to Monatia with Drusus and Tiberius...
Agrippa deserves the title, by the way. Drusus, I don't think he does. He has been pretty smart in how he does things, kind of in the start of things, but he just gets in, gets a little bit done, and then runs away again.
In 10 BCE, as the campaigning season approached, rebellion and raiding on the Danube drew Augustus's and Tiberius's attention away, but Drusus proceeded to the Rhine without them. This time, Drusus set out from Mogontiacum, seeking to subdue the Chatti, a very different enemy from the guerrilla fighters he had dealt with before.
Okay.
The Chatti were reputed as being more than formidable warriors, and more organized than most other Germanic hosts, but they were still no match for the Romans. At the end of the campaigning season, Drusus had reached the Werra River, where he erected a fort near modern Hedemunden, and detached a single cohort to guard his new conquest. Returning to his stepfather in Monatia, he travelled to Rome, where he was sworn in as consul at the beginning of 9 BCE. Drusus's final year was just as rapidly paced as the previous. Setting out once again from Mogontiacum, he carved a path through the Black Forest to the land of the Suebi, a large confederation which he defeated only with considerable bloodshed. From there he turned north once again to the Weser, defeating the Cherusci a second time and advancing to the Elbe, which he was unable to construct a bridge across before the end of the campaign season. Instead, he ordered his men to construct a tropaeum over the equipment of the defeated Marcomanni, receiving a portent from a strange, allegedly superhuman-sized woman. Drusus, unsettled, turned back with haste towards the Rhine, but fell from his horse, which landed on him and broke his leg. Unable to continue their return to Mogontiacum, the Romans erected a marching camp, which they called the Castra Scelerata, or Accursed Encampment, after the seemingly supernatural events which had haunted their retreat. There, word was sent of Drusus's mortal wound to Augustus and Tiberius at Ticinum, and Tiberius rushed to his side. After 30 days, Drusus died from gangrene. Tiberius led a column of his centurions and military tribunes along the road to Mogontiacum in a show of reverence, where the leading men of each settlement allegedly stepped out to take their turn carrying his body. Even the Romans' Germanic adversaries halted hostilities to let the procession pass. Drusus was taken back to Rome and laid to rest in an opulent funeral in the Circus Flaminius by his brother and stepfather, who now stood with neither Agrippa nor his succeeding potentiate to act as their right hand. And special thanks again to War Thunder, the most diverse and authentic vehicle combat game out there. Get it?
Alright. Damn. Okay. Pretty curious to see what evidence there is of them being in Jutland. In the southern part of Jutland. Curious. I think Drusus did not deserve all of his titles. Maybe one title after everything he did. But I think he got 4 for minimal work. It wasn't that, he isn't that impressive, honestly. So yeah. Pretty curious to see how much he would have been able to accomplish though if he hadn't died. That was pretty interesting. So yeah, I kind of don't get why they don't just expand by the rivers like that. There's so many rivers in that area. They could have probably used for more permanent settlements and then to push themselves forward. They kind of it should have been easier than even the takeover of Gaul. Oh yeah. Yes, the original video will be down in the description, guys. If you guys want to check out some more history videos, I will have a playlist up on screen. Otherwise, see you guys later. Bye.
Bare feet in the furrowed ground, dust on my tongue. heat bearing down. Sun like a hammer on my back. Name I was born with, they took that. But my chains flow soft like water, running through this tired soul. You can bind my hands together, you can't cage what rivers know.